even less of the citizens' views will get through to people in public office and so on. And we see that as a dangerous cycle because that's the kind of situation in which authoritarianism could breed. Also, everyone, you've just seen that this session is being recorded, so we hope you're okay with that. So the next thing is, of course, what are we talking about with decision-making and democratizing it? So just to quickly illustrate that, we've got here what you might call a very simple illustration of a policy cycle. So at the top here, we have policies being formed and decisions being made about how government will use its resources. And then that leads on to policies and decisions being implemented in various ways. Now, this is a massive oversimplification, of course. We know that there are extra things that come into this cycle. Policies once formed still might need to be ratified by Parliament, for example. They might result in procurement that needs to happen to find people to provide those services and projects. And then whilst those things are being implemented, there needs to be monitoring and evaluation of them and lessons learned to inform the new policies that are made. And when we talk about democratizing decision-making, we're often talking about the bit at the top. So when the decisions are made and the policies are formed, we have processes like consultation and participatory budgeting and citizens' assemblies and so on. This is what we often think about. And I'm going to illustrate a quick example that I like here. We're going to hear lots more, of course, from our speakers. But here's one which is one of the OGP starred commitments, one of the outstanding commitments from OGP from Uruguay, which I really like. So this was all about democratizing the country's national water plan. This happened in the 2000s. The water sector was taken out of private ownership, and so big consultation needed to happen. But the way they did it was both very broad, so nearly 2,000 citizens from all walks of life were contributing ideas on how the water sector should be run, but then also very deliberative and much more specific. So a diverse panel of 15 citizens was brought together to consider all of the proposals. The link for that one is on these slides, which we can share afterwards, but I also believe a colleague of mine is going to share that link in the chat around now if people would like to look into that one further. So that's obviously looking at the side of how do we form policies in the first place. But one of the things I really want to point out is that we've also got this other side of the cycle. And this is the side where we have things like citizen feedback, citizen-led monitoring, and processes like social audits, checking on how things are being implemented. But the point here is that decisions are made here as well. And actually some very, very important decisions. So decisions about how you might adapt services and projects and change how resources are being used, decisions on how you respond to people's feedback and people's complaints. And they can be just as critical as the decisions that are made in the policy formulation stage. A quick example of this comes from Integrity Action's own work. So we run in partnership, and including in partnership with ADC, the host of this session, we run some citizen monitoring programs, and these involve citizens reporting problems on public services and public projects that they should be benefiting from. They use a digital app to do that. And what you're seeing here is a screenshot of DevCheck, which is an app that you can see online and which you can see photos and progress reports on how different projects and services are going. And all of these reports lead into collaborative problem-solving processes, which effectively are decision-making processes. It's decisions on how these problems and this feedback is going to be responded to. So all of this comes under decision-making from our perspective. So what this introduction is about is simply trying to expand the scope of this discussion to make sure that all of these processes are relevant and that people's experiences can be brought into this umbrella of decision-making. So without further ado, I'm going to go back to the speakers, and we're going to firstly hear from Lilya. She was introduced earlier. She is, of course, a critical person within Armenia when it comes to the implementation of OGP. So it's great to have her with us and helping us to explain what's happening with that. So Lilya, please go ahead, and we'll then move on to the next after that.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. Greetings from Armenia once again. Happy for this opportunity to share our experience and to listen about our colleagues, about their approaches and expressions and thoughts about generally how could co-creation help for the good governance. As you know, Armenia joined Open Government Partnership Initiative in 2011. It's just from the beginning, the initiative launched. and implemented 4 national action plans. I was integrated in 3 of them. And the whole philosophy of the OGP process is not about which commitments the government will tackle, but about making the process collaborative using participatory technologies and mechanisms. Each OGP participant country either tries to use its own tools or to localize the succeeded mechanisms. Let me to share my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So turning to Armenian practice, our OGP national action plans have right in quality and impact over these years, especially with each time we are developing more citizens' needs-oriented or potentially transformed commitments. And here we can state that these achievements have been facilitated by using more collaborative methods each time. And which methods did we use for achieving these approaches? We use crowdsourcing, focus on thematic discussions, town hall meetings, open public meetings, and public exhibitions. These are the main tools that we use for the co-creation and implementation processes. Turning to crowdsourcing, it is well known within OGP community as what is special about this tool. When we co-create our new OGP National Action Plan in 2016, we at first circulate the call for all state ministries and agencies, then collect proposals from them through official channels like Malware system. However, this was a danger for us, as we can miss or ignore middle range employees or civil servants who may see a deeper problems than their superiors or heads of departments, administrations. And this helped us to facilitate some processes and raise some questions that wasn't or weren't visible for that time. Also, this tool helped us to ensure a more inclusive participation process throughout the country. The citizens of border-situated regions could reach us and send their proposals. The tool was recognized by OGP in 2016 as the best co-creation method. The second tool that we used was the focus and thematic discussion. Sometimes citizens' proposals that they submitted for OGP were very superficial and need to revise. It is difficult to understand how they can be localized within the government strategies and within the OGP action plan, and how could be solved the raised problem of this proposal. So we used the focus and thematic discussions with the authors of proposals and discuss the ideas with the officials from the line ministries and agencies, how to solve and achieve them. And as a result, many of proposals which weren't meet the OGP requirements and principles were implemented outside the OGP. So this also helped us to bring more actors to the co-creation process. The next and more achieved tool, it was town hall meetings. Town hall meetings used in 2018 during the co-creation process with our partners from ADC. It were championed within the OGP co-creation process for us, for Armenia, and also it was successfully reached the successes in implementation processes also, not only during the co-creation process, but also during the implementation process. The success of this tool lies in its philosophy, where the user is not a passive beneficiary, but an expert in their own social challenges. So based on this tool, we managed to enrich 6 OGP commitments commitments of local government's accountability, water resource management, healthcare, transparency, education institutions, and land resources, and the access to social services. We bring users insight and feedback in structured and content-based format. Town hall method is used both during the co-creation and implementation periods, and key outcomes of achievements were subnational reach, the legislative outcomes, and user insight incorporation. We can go deeper speaking about this tool, but we have a shortage in time, so I'll be brief. But if you will have some questions, I'll answer them. The project, Town Hall project, has reached out to a wide range of users groups, bringing targeted views, reaching out the public servants inside the bureaucracy, allowing them to submit their ideas on OGP commitments and be engaged. And third, the private sector segment also was integrated, in particular, the vibrant tech community of Armenia. So going next, I would like to speak also about the open public discussions and public exhibitions. Open public discussions and public exhibitions do not show any results immediately, but rather raised awareness of the process of OGP and co-creation, and it had an educational training component for new actors. So awareness has great potential as it attracts new participants and actors to bring them to OGP co-creation and implementation processes. This in turn helps us to attract and find broader professionals and experienced partners. Indeed, presenting our experience, we must not forget that during these 2 years, we are living in a period of escalation and pandemic. It is very difficult to maintain the ability to democratic values. People are more concerned with their own health and safety issues. So it's time to think and rethink our steps and use participatory tools to solve the current problems, not only within OGP process or any international integration processes. This is the problem we are currently facing in the process of development of new national OGP action plan. So if we succeed in this, bringing more actors and more experienced ones, we can prove that we have taken a step forwards and can together decide where to go. This is the essence of participation process and co-creation process, and also using of different technologies and tools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lilya. And within your talk, we heard a little bit about town hall approach to decision making, and we're going to hear more about that now from Annie. So Annie, would you like to go ahead? Annie, I can just see you're on mute there, although we can see your screen.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Derek. Thank you for your introduction. So I'm Annie, and I will present town hall methodology as an effective model of public participation decision-making process. Lilya has already introduced the key outcomes and achievements in OGP co-creation and co-implementation when using town hall methodology. So in my turn, I will focus on the technical part of the tool. So what is the aim of town hall methodology and why we do it, or what if we don't do? Actually, I will say in short that this tool came to respond to the issue of a democratic deficit, because modern times have witnessed the redefinition of decision-making processes where community participation has become imperative there. You may remember that initially these processes were built upon the expertise and bureaucratic hierarchies, but they have become increasingly inclusive and shared ones, as shown by the new concept of the governance and participatory regulations. So to be in short, I will say that this is a very practical tool which is applied to strengthen the citizens' voices in public decision-making processes with an opportunity for the general public to give and ask questions on the public key issues to those in leadership positions direct, and to build trust and capacity among citizens in decision-making processes. Passing to the technical part of the tool, I will say that this tool has very specific format and a unique process. In fact, it effectively restores the balance of the politically playing field by engaging 5 mixed groups of 10 people around each table. But here you may ask, how do we choose who goes in which table, and do every table have a mixture of people? The answer is that we are forming tables based on the representation and inclusiveness at the same time. That is to say, we follow that around each table we have decision makers, we have people from different backgrounds and experts in the relevant sphere. We have so-called hosting people who stand for the registration desk and help and orient people to find their tables there. At each table, you may see from the photos there, at each table we have a moderator who facilitates the discussion, and we have a note taker with computers who record all the ideas exchanged around the table and submit it to the head operator and the town hall expert at the end of the meeting. The photos depicted there are like before COVID-19, but we do town hall meetings in the era of COVID-19 too, either in remote ways or offline, but keeping all the anti-epidemic rules and regulations there, like wearing masks, keeping social distance, etc. But it doesn't matter, we do it online or offline. The most important thing is that at the end of the town hall meetings, each participant vote on specific proposal using polling keypads or computer programs. And once the meeting ends, the final recommendations are compiled into a report, which is distributed to the participants, to the decision makers, and the media. Here, as for me, I think the process is very important because decision makers actively engage in the meeting by participating in the table discussion, observing the processes, and responding to the citizen input directly. In parallel to its specific format and unique process, town hall meeting has also very emphasized peculiarities. The model has very emphasized features, and one of them is the opportunity of scaling up. That is to say, the methodology of town hall meetings is flexible enough in terms of scales, and we can organize town hall meetings based on community by community, region by region, or even 2 or 4 regions altogether, where the number of the participants can vary from 50 people to 100 people in a meeting. Yet it's not so much desirable to conduct a single meeting in the capital city, Yerevan, by inviting all the representatives, different representatives in all 10 regions in Armenia, because in this case, we will keep the representative nature of the model, but here we will lose the inclusiveness. And we will ensure widely participation, and we will lose widely participation on this path. So when we want to discuss global topics, we do nationwide meetings, but not a single meeting in Yerevan, but rather organizing 4 or 5 town hall meetings, because we have 10 regions in Armenia, and we were neighboring regions participating in one, for example, town hall meeting. And in this case, we cover all the marches, but not just doing one single meeting, but trying to at least conduct 4 or 5 meetings. The next important feature of this tool is its inclusive participation and the variety of people and ideas around each table, and the creation of an environment in which people feel involved, respected, valued, and connected. Clear articulation of priorities is one of the other peculiarities of the model, addressing the needs of citizens, the needs of decision makers, the needs of democracy, involving decision makers at from the very first stage up to the end, where decision makers engage, participating in the table discussions, observing the processes, and trying to answer all the questions that the citizens may have. To conclude this brief presentation on town hall meetings, I can say that this tool once again came to emphasize that without voting, there is no democracy. And whether physically present or remote, town hall meetings are important because it can get rid of misunderstandings and foster internal alignment without the need for like backdoor access to information or secondhand information. Town hall meetings, as far as town hall meetings focuses on discussions and deliberations among citizens rather than speeches, Q&A sessions, or panel presentations, they are really emphasizing the voting and the deliberation and the dialogue with citizens and the government at the same time. However, we use technology there, and the technology transforms the individual table discussions into one larger group discussion, one scale voting, and comprehensive voices raised there. That's all. I thank you for your attention and thank you for taking your time.
Thank you very much, Annie. And if I may just ask, because we have a little bit of time, if I may just ask you a quick clarifying question now, could you tell us whether the town hall methodology, whether you apply it to specific topics such as education or health, or is it, are the events kind of broader, and do they cover many different topics within each one?
Yes, actually we apply town hall methodology for the co-creation of commitments for the OGP national action plans. And among them, we have topics like healthcare, we have education, and what's important that we apply town hall meetings while like co-creating these commitments, developing these commitments with the citizen inputs. And then when all these commitments were inserted in the action plans, we also conducted town hall meetings with your mentioned topics, and we try to validate it with the citizens. Yeah, so I can say that we conducted with these topics. And as I have already mentioned, the tool is very flexible one, and you can not only like decide the scale of town hall meetings, that is to say, you can organize town hall meetings with 50 people, with 100 people, but also it's flexible enough in terms of topics.
Brilliant. Thank you, Annie. And I'm sure we'll come back with some more questions. I certainly have some more, but I'm going to save those. And let's hand over now to Hovhannes. Would you like to go ahead, Hovhannes?
Yep. So thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, Lilya and Annie, for the presentation and for the introduction, what is being done and how you are working. I will make my talk without a presentation, so it would be more like an interactive way, and if there are some questions during the presentation, please feel free to interrupt and go on. So I would like to start with the quote that if we are talking about the democracy, it's not about the law of majority, but it's about the protection of minority, what I think. And that's why whatever we are doing currently with the UNDP Future Today project and in relation to the OGP or the principles of democratization of decision making, not only on the local level, but on the governmental level, is always done in a way to keep the ideas or to get the insights from whoever possible, and not only about from the majorities or from the people who are actively involved, but we are more trying to engage the people who were not before that engaged in the decision-making process. And in that part, one of the biggest opportunities that we had in partnership with the Prime Minister Office of Armenia was the implementation of the training sessions for different representatives of local authorities and NGOs or CSOs from different places, trying to teach them what kind of mechanism or what kind of framework we have in order to put the democratic decision-making processes in every decision that the government or local authorities does. So one of the main outcomes of during these years of work that we have done was that the e-governance tools or digital tools currently need to be implemented in a higher rate than they are done at this stage. But what is more important, that we don't need to implement just those e-governance tools or those I don't know, frameworks just for them. We need to really understand how do they need to work, because I will bring a few examples from Armenia that there are tons of e-governance tools, there are tons of tools that support for the decision-making process, there are feedback mechanisms, etc. But few of them actually work in the best way they need to work. And it's not only the issue in Armenia or anywhere else, it's the issue in all over the world that a lot of those tools are not customer oriented. So in a lot of cases, we don't build the things that will really consider the insight, or that really consider the, how to say, they wouldn't gather really the ideas from the people, from those from whom we need to make the decision based on. So during this work with the OGP contact point and with Lilya, what we figure out that before starting making the new stuff, we really need to understand what works well and what is not working well. And that's why we started to do a research with one of the leading e-governance agencies in Armenia to understand what the people really need, why they don't use the already existing mechanisms, why they don't use the tools that are already in place, and what we need to change. So my speech is a bit away from what we are doing. It's more about what we are thinking to do in the future. And that is the principle, the main goal that we figure out, at least for me, was that we need to make a bit shift from pure, maybe public way of thinking about decision making and go a bit to the business side of thinking about decision making, because we all know that the businesses all over the world, they are working more efficient than the public authorities does. And it is not just because the businesses are for profit. It is just because that they are trying to cut the costs, they are trying to cut the operations as much as possible to have the best practices, to have the best work, process flow wherever possible. And that's the case that currently I think that the future of democratic decision making should be based on the principles of doing business kind of, although keeping the social aspect, although keeping that the main benefit is not the profit, but it's the 3P principles, like economic, the environmental, and the social part. So that's the reason that currently we are thinking to launch a new project in Armenia. We discussed already with a few people and with the potential donors, and we want to have the OGP accelerator in Armenia. So basically what it will mean that anytime, any way, when we are proposing anything which is about the democratic approach, or if we are putting together a new mechanism or a new framework, a new tool, it is not just coming out of our minds and later we are testing with the people, but from before the implementation, we are doing a customer research, we are doing the validation, we are doing an incubation of that tool, of that framework, and only after that it goes into the public. This is the first part that I think is important, that through the time will help us to have more targeted and more need-based tools for democratic decision making. And the second part, as I have mentioned, is that we need to try to bring on board as many end users as possible, because in most of the cases, even in business, because I'm coming, basically my background is quite business oriented. I was working for a really long time in the incubation and acceleration of startups from different places, and a few of them were B2G startups. Whatever I figure out that it's not only important what you produce, but it's really important if you are able to attract the real users. So that was the reason that I started with the quote that in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter if you have the vote of the majority. If you are not protecting the minority, it doesn't make sense. So my idea that whenever we are doing whatever we are doing is need to be based just on that principles, that leaving no one behind principle must always be in place, and any kind of like democratic decision process, any kind of, I don't know, activity that is done in that part should be always like covering that aspect. So I think that for me it would be a bit more like effective if you will have any questions about the topic that I have covered or about the topic that I have mentioned, so it would be more interactive. So from my end, I would say that that is what I was thinking to tell during this like individual speech. So feel free to ask any question, or if you have any comments or any place for debating, feel free to reach out or to ask a question.
Thank you very much, Hovhannes. And again, because we have a little bit of time, I'm going to ask you a quick clarifying question now.
Yeah.
And I was really interested to hear about your emphasis both on leaving no one behind and on the business approach. Could you just elaborate for us a little bit whether the two of those are in tension? So the need to run things more efficiently, does that almost play against the need to try and involve minorities and take perhaps extra time and extra effort to make sure that those people's voices are heard?
Actually, I don't believe that they are opposite to each other, because in reality, like when we are talking about decision-making process, like maybe some 6 or 7 years ago, it was more about sustainable decision-making process when you were trying to have everything like cost-cutted or on a most sustainable manner. I believe that in 21st century and maybe on the last few years, it's more about responsible decision-making process. When I say responsibility, I mean that we need to be responsible towards all the people who this or that way might be affected. And within that, keeping that in mind, we need to be more business-oriented. I mean, still we need to consider the rights and the choice of the minorities, because in a lot of cases when it is about decision-making, how it works, it's a simple voting. Okay, who wants to have this? Everybody are raising their hands at the democratic way, this or that way, and we are counting that 70% out of the total population did this, but we are not considering that there are some fewer percent of minorities for whom it's really an essential need, and we don't cover it because just the 70% raised their hands. And when I say that we need to consider that minority, we need still to consider it, but again, keeping in mind all the principles of the business side, like to have it in the most efficient way, digital tools, processes smoother, keeping the processes more engaging. For instance, currently one of our grantees that is working for the support of our Future Today project, they are implementing a decision-making tool, which is quite interesting tool, and it's about the decision-making process, how to systematize the decision-making process. They split it, the whole process into 4 parts, and you can select each part how long it will take. So there are some tools that are actually working now towards it. And when you will look to that process, to that software that they are developing, you will really see that through different democratization tools, they are trying to keep it in a way that the minority's voice would be always listened, but at the same time, they are trying to keep it business oriented, so it all will be documented, it all will be in the most cost efficient manner. And what is most important, they keep it open for everyone. So one of the biggest challenges that I think is not that people don't have a place to go and to talk. In most of the cases, the issue that people don't want to do it. So we're always fighting that there are no tools for democracy, there are no place for people to talk, but in reality, when you are doing the analysis, you can see that it's not about the low number of tools, it's about the low engagement of the people who need to use those tools. So one of the other things that we need to think, we need to promote to different people that there are these tools. And maybe there are different reasons for that, why people don't use it. One of them, I think that it's a lack of trust. So the people don't trust that in reality, if they will suggest anything, if they will make a comment, if they will suggest a new agenda to the government wouldn't take it seriously or wouldn't consider it. But I believe if through the time people will see that even few percent of their suggestions in reality is being implemented by the government. So if the government can showcase what they have done based on the comments or based on the suggestions of the people, of the citizens' engagement will go higher and higher. And even the existing tools that we have at the moment would be enough. Just we need to attract, as I told, the minorities, all the other people whose voice was not being heard, not because of that we don't want it, just because they were not pretty sure that it makes sense to talk. So my idea is that that's the way how we can merge the leaving no one behind principle with the business side of the decision making.
Thank you. Thank you. Fascinating. And you've brought in a number of central issues within OGP there: inclusion, trust, and the importance of having systematic processes as well. So thanks, and I'm sure we'll return to some of these themes in the discussion later. So we're now going to move to our final speaker. That's Arman, who's speaking to us from Luxembourg. So Arman, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So here I will share my slides with you from my other account. But before starting my main topic, I want to introduce you with our participants. So our training is about citizenship and participation. And we have participants from Romania. We have participants from Armenia. We have participants from Germany, Cyprus, Greece, Netherlands, Lithuania, Italy, and also from Luxembourg. And of course, yeah, we have Spain/Italy participants as well. And of course, Georgia as well. We have Georgian participants. The topics here, what we were discussing was more about citizenship, human rights, our rights and obligations as citizens. We have also talked about conventional and unconventional city participation, and we also looked through participation as a research and looking through a quantitative research and participatory research methodologies, which Ani already talked about town hall as an example. Here, however, we didn't have the chance to talk much about participation platforms, so this was a great opportunity to introduce our participants of the OGP platform, and also to introduce a little bit more about participation, how it is happening in real life, and what are the critical and optimistic views, and what is the consensus in these two competing theories. So I'm going to talk about my research, which is about the role of participation in good governance through looking at the case of open government partnership platform in selected country. And I did this research in the frames of my master's thesis within Erasmus Mundus joint master's degree program of international development studies called GLODE. So here you can see the goal was to understand the role of the participation of civil society and government representatives in OGP platform, and how does it foster the good governance. And what I looked to try the different interests, dynamic, power relationship of participants to promote for good governance through qualitative research, and I used in-depth interview, focus group discussions, and documentation analysis. This is the literature review. I will not focus too much on different parts of the literature review, but I will talk a little bit about discourse on participation. We heard a lot about positive sides of the participation from our different speakers, and during this training course program, because participation is seen as a key for deliberative democracy, and direct participation, direct democracy is seen as a way to engage citizens, to see citizens as interested and to bring the actual changes through direct participation. And this is seen as a way to promote Western democratic values, Western democracy, liberal democracy, yeah? And it's seen as a solution. However, there is also competing authors from post-development authors, such as Zai, Mubarak, Escobar, yeah? And they are, what is their perspective is that participation in reality is used as a tool for manipulation. And in real life, citizen participation is just a way to legitimize the government's decisions. And actually the grassroots and vulnerable people do not participate, and just other citizens, participants, and the ones who actually need to participate to raise their voice, they are not in these participation mechanisms. And the post-development authors also criticize that the international donor agencies and Western democratic countries, they use the participation as a way to promote their agenda, their way of development, and rather than trying to understand the bottom up, the local issues that arise. And there is also the approach of Williams and White, which think that this polarization is not correct. We cannot see participation as a savior. We cannot see participation as a savior of deliberation and as a savior, as an empowering factor for citizens, because this is the one view, the optimistic view, that participation empowers citizens, it gives them voice. So it's a one polarization. And there are also, we cannot see it as a way of legitimation, because participation is a process. And in the process, the outcome cannot be predefined. You do not know what will be the end product of the participation. So these authors say that there can be different participation. Of course, there can be a nominal participation when it's more done for legitimation, but there is also transformative, where there is empowerment, there is change, there is also representative and instrumental. So there are like different ways of participation, and it's not predetermined, and we cannot define how it is. And there are also important things. When we see participation as a process, we need to look what are the interests of the participants, who are participating, and we have to look also, is there a conflict? Because if there is real participation, there should be somehow a conflict, a competing interest. If there is no real conflict, and if it's just done on, we agree each other, we agree, like there is no competing ideas, then there is not really real participation. The next thing I will talk about was criteria of selecting country. So first, it was about my own interest in Eastern Partnership region. And of course, I excluded Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. Azerbaijan and Belarus are not members of, Belarus never joined. Azerbaijan participation was frozen, and Armenia for me was excluded because I was involved in the OGP processes, and I wanted to study a different example, different case study, so I can be more or less fair. Of course, I took my knowledge about OGP and I used my background to understand key in-depth questions, but I would be biased to analyze Armenia. Hence, Georgia and Ukraine were the options, and I chose Georgia because it was more politically stable, because after 2004 revolution, there was no revolution. The governments were changing by elections, and they had a huge increase in corruption perception and GDP. They had quite improvements. So, and as well as it is important to say that Georgia was is active member of OGP platform as one of the steering committee members. here about Georgia. For the methodology, the sample was quite small because it was qualitative research, and I did in-depth interview of the participant key NGOs, and I tried to reach out government members. I reached some government members, so I have in-depth interviews, but in reality, what the main limitation of this research was that most of the public servants didn't reply to my emails, and they didn't participate in the in-depth interviews, and only like key other figures participated. So, but again, as a researcher, I tried to use the silence as a way of understanding their interests too, because it indicates something too. And the focus group discussion with grassroots NGOs who are not in Tbilisi and who work with young people or who work with different organizations. I will just quickly pass to the results. Perception on participation was just taking part in decision making. That was the most common among all beneficiary groups. But there was also mistrust towards NGOs, towards government, highlighted as one of the key aspects of why people do not participate. Because like the mistrust towards NGOs, mistrust towards government, how previously they have been disappointed, and it is really hard for the participants to trust. And also one of the challenges for participation was, again, for how some people associate NGOs and government or these processes as more pro-Western value promoters. Perception on good governance as the discourse on good governance is quite interesting because it is not defined, it is not seen as one thing, because as good governance itself, as you read the theory, you see there are different ways of interpretation of good governance. There is one that is seeing participation itself as a good governance, transparency and accountability as a good governance, human rights as a part of good governance. And there are different donors and different literature seeing good governance defining differently. And also electronic governance is also seen as good governance. And what I saw that different stakeholders based on their interests saw all the factors of good governance as a thing. And that's why OGP, it was one of the goals of the OGP was to set the platform to set the good governance agenda that will be relevant. And geopolitics of participation. And in case of Georgia, it was really hard to ignore because both government and NGOs highlighted their aspiration to be European and seeing good governance as something as European, and promoting transparency and accountability as a factor of approval that they are European and that they want to be integrated to Europe. And this was main motivation. And I will discuss, and one of these aspirations that were raised, it also plays a negative annotation because what we see that the government listens to international donors more, and some suggestions that come from CSOs, for example, they are not implemented until sometimes embassies intervene and they ask for or they support some some grants, or they advocate, the embassies advocate for some reforms. So in this case, this geopolitical aspiration gives more influential power to donor organizations rather than the CSOs. And power and participation dynamics in OGP, what we saw that here the CSOs have more consultative process, and the NGOs who were part of the process, they were complaining that they are participating, but not always their ideas are being taken. And so there is more consultative, which was also confirmed by the documentative analysis of independent researcher review. And more about power and participation dynamics. There was a conflict present in Georgia, which shows that the process is real, because there is no conflict, there is no real participation, because when NGOs saw that their commitments are not being taken by the government, They reached out to the steering committee, they complained, and there was a change proposed that intergovernmental agency would be created with the NGOs having the right to vote for choosing the commitments on the same level as government. As time of my research, this platform, this interagency committee was not, it was established but didn't have its first meeting. But however, we see how there was conflict between CSO and government, and it was issued. So the process of participation here, we can see, was not predetermined. Yeah. And as about CSO participation, what I would talk about here, just very quickly, this stakeholder mapping. Yeah, the non-participant CSOs, the focus groups, unfortunately showed that most of the grassroots organizations and organizations that work with young people or with people with disabilities, they do not know about OGP, and they are quite interested in policy level discussion, but they are not aware of OGP. And what you can also see in the list of the participant NGO, they are mainly, the participants are Tbilisi based. They are the very well-known organization in the field of transparency and accountability. So this is expert level participation rather than bottom-up participation of grassroots and different youth groups or different organizations, hence showing that they are not very well represented in the platform. And as for the questions, how of course, NGOs and government, they say, we think it's enough participation. They believe it's enough that there is expert level discussion, but they also mentioned that joining the process is open. And if NGOs would apply to join the process, that there is open door basically. However, there is not much action to engage these NGOs because it is believed that there is enough participation. As for public servant participation, it is interesting to see because they are very influential. They are the ones who carry the burden of the reform. And what you see that they are not interested to participate because couple of reasons. The CSOs think that it is a burden for them to participate because when they participate, they get more responsibilities to do with their other daily tasks. So it is becoming a lot of work for them. So one thing is that they are not interested. And second, it's very hierarchical. And even the government representative talking with me when I say, what is the motivation of the public servants? One of the mentions was that because there is a high level decision. So this hierarchical decision was made the present. So the public servants are participating because there is high level decision. So as for the discussion, what you can see some of the points that participation is seen as a process as Williams and White. You can see that as Escobar and Sash are making that indeed sometimes participation can be used as a manipulative way of participating. And also the civil society resistance shows that it cannot be predetermined process, and the power relationship has changed. I'm sorry, 1 second. So the dynamic process, and I'm just quickly summing up the results. Some state wants to please international organizations, which gives more power to international organizations, as I talked, and also it gives more obligation to public servants. So it is crucial to understand how it can be, there can be alternative ways to promote public servant participations. And exclusion, as post-development authors say, that sometimes grassroots organizations, the vulnerable groups, are excluded from the process. So it's very, very critical to think about how is this seen. And last but not least, one of my conclusions that how effective is open government platform to establish this consensus on good governance is really difficult to define. So it is not defined by my thesis because I felt the need to look it into international level and took more than one country to exclude the external and internal factors and to see. So there is no definitive outcome on the OGP's role of good governance case. And as for recommendations, one is that there is a need for research to do how the OGP is playing a role in facilitating the consensus of good governance. There is a need to understand the local level OGP, which is in Georgia's case, there are like municipality level OGPs as well, to understand maybe grassroots organizations are more active there, which I didn't look into because my only scope was the national level. And in order to be more inclusive, the OGP in Georgia has to be more proactive in including small and grassroots organizations and vulnerable people, and to encourage participants of public servants through alternative ways. This is my research. I hope it was helpful to sum up a little bit what it takes to take the participation. Thank you.
Round of applause there. Well done, Arman. And thank you from us as well, Arman. That was fascinating to hear about. And I don't know if you have a link as yet to the research you've just taken us through, but if so, please do share it in the chat. And if not, then hopefully we'll be able to share your slides afterwards. There was some fascinating stuff there. So that's the end of the presentations from our speakers. I've just posted in the chat as well. Please do put any questions that you have in the chat, or given that we don't have a huge number of people, I think it will be perfectly fine to raise your hand if you would like to say something. I probably need to just change my view to make sure I can see if anybody has raised their hand, not as yet. So please do either of those things to put forward a question or a reflection if you would like to make that. And obviously we have had people from OGP here, so it would be very interesting to hear any OGP reflections on all of that as well. I'm going to put a question in first though, and this is about the pandemic. So it's something that we've heard a little bit about so far in the session today, but when it comes to participation and democratic decision-making, it's just been such a difficult scenario for us now, having to respect social distancing and respect all the restrictions that governments have had to bring in to control the spread of infection. It just makes those face-to-face spaces much more difficult to organize, and in some cases moves participation to online spaces, of course. Could I just go back to Lilya firstly, tell us a little bit more about how you've tried to address that challenge since the pandemic has started within the OGP process?
Thank you, Derek. Indeed, it was very hard for us as we should co-create our national action plan last year, but we faced pandemic and the escalation in our country. And so the old mechanisms and processes related to the co-creation, to the face-to-face meetings were cancelled, as it was the question of security, physical and not physical security. It was the question of security. So the government and the processes and the whole communication was insulated. And it wasn't the question and issue of Armenia, but all our partners from OGP community faced these obstacles. All in all, I would like to state that we used the new technologies to overcome the processes. And I would like to state that out of these difficulties, we could bring two communities, Banazor and Gyumri, in 2020, and discuss how can these communities to be integrated in OGP processes. And finally, at the end of October 2020, these two communities by the consortium format became the members of local OGP. All in all, when we're summing up the process for these new co-creation processes, we I would like to state that we have changed our views and approaches, and we would like to force calm and to oversee the upcoming challenges and tackle some actions to overcome them. But all in all, here is one philosophy that we should solve the failures of the past, then to go forward and overcoming the upcoming obstacles. So this is, I would like to state, one of the challenges, and hope to overcome it within OGP new National Action Plan.
Thank you very much, Lilya. So I can see Adna has her hand up. That's Adna from OGP, of course. And then after Adna, I think Arman is saying that some of the group participants from Luxembourg who are in the room there have got some questions. So we'll go over there shortly. But Adna, would you like to tell us your question or reflection?
Thanks, Derek. I apologize, I'm not on video this morning, but just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for organizing this really, really interesting session. And I was listening to Arman's findings, which I thought, from the country level experience, and really raised, I think, some things that we've been aware of and need to also have recognized that we need to address. And for instance, one of them is the type of organizations, right, that are involved in the OGP process. You mentioned, that it's organizations, at least in Georgia, that, were based in Tbilisi, that are sort of the bigger players. And this is, I don't think, limited to Georgia. I think we've seen it in different countries. They tend to be transparency, accountability organizations. So it's the diversity, first of all, of organizations that we need to address. And then it's how to guarantee, that space for having an equal say. I think there's a very it's a very fine balance between what the OGP support unit can do in terms of mandating, right? The OGP units within governments, and how to do certain things. I think frankly, I don't know that we can mandate it. I think it's more working together to find a way to include different types of civil society organizations, to broaden the process and let them lead on it in terms of the country ownership approach, which is really integral to OGP. But I do think it's lacking. I think also one of the things that the OGP support unit can do and has discussed, and I don't know where that will go, is doing almost a study of the profile of organizations that are currently participating to see where the shortages are, and that can also then inform the kind of process that then we would work through with countries to diversify, if that makes sense. So that was just a reflection. But thanks to everybody. It's been really, really good to listen to the presentations.
Thank you very much, Adna. And I quite agree. It's lots of fascinating points. I have far too many questions myself to fit in, so let's not worry about those right now. Arman, let's go back to you. I think you said that there are some people in the group with you who had some questions. Would you like to have any questions through the microphone, perhaps? Yes.
I will ask to the group who have questions to come closer to the camera and mic and ask. Please say who you are, from what country, and ask your question.
Hello, thank you for the speeches. I'm Codrin from Romania, and I really like the aspect of inclusion of everyone in the participation processes. And especially I have a question regarding the town hall meetings. Should there be any selection criteria for the participants? And if not, like, how do you see the risks, maybe the bias risk?
Please go ahead, Annie. And then while you're speaking, perhaps someone new can come into the hot seat. But Anyway, Annie, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. This is a very important question, and inclusiveness is one of the main features of the town hall methodology, without which, if we don't keep this inclusiveness, we can say that we will not benefit the best outcomes there. But actually fostering marginalized communities to participate, and not only just to participate, but to participate meaningfully, it's not an easy task, and especially when we are speaking about the regions and the rural areas. And the point, as I have already mentioned, is that the challenges of twofold. On the one hand, it's really difficult to motivate these people to take part in the meetings, and on the other hand, it's really difficult to ensure their involvement in the processes and thought contribution. So while selecting the participants for the town hall meetings, it's important to say that our organization has some informal strategies which we generally apply to make it inclusive. So to select and to invite and to select participants, we generally collaborate with local actors. First, we build alliances with all the local actors in the community and regions, and this including like social security agencies, medical social expertise committees, employment center, regional agencies, local NGOs, schools, local government, etc., to get these people. And then we conduct huge awareness raising campaign, and we are not limited to just applying for a stakeholder and being sure that they will by all means invite these people, but it is I can say that it is a time-consuming work to be accomplished to ensure inclusiveness. And we also apply our active civic groups and monitors in order to help us to find these people, to mobilize these people, and even we may go door by door. One important point that I also would like to mention on the path of inclusiveness is respecting diversity while conducting these town hall meetings and group discussions around the tables. We believe that inclusiveness is maintained when participants belong to different groups and not only members of the marginalized group. So in one table, we try to involve not only marginalized groups, but also people not belonging to these marginalized groups. And last but not least, in town hall methodology, professional staff is very important, and the facilitator's role is very important, so as to encourage all the members around the table to speak, because just being present during the meeting, they of course raise awareness, but they not like benefit from citizen input and feedback. So for town hall meetings, we have formed a group of professional facilitators, moderators, who pass training on how to maintain diversity. So during the meeting, they work with everyone, or they try to work with everyone around the table, holding discussions and deliberations among citizens rather than speeches or panel presentations, as I have already mentioned in my presentation. So all parties are bound by a common purpose, but everyone does their part of job equally.
Thank you very much.
I hope I have answered your question.
I think that sounded very comprehensive. Thank you, Annie. So we have another question. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Annie. I'm from Armenia, and my question will be just the continuation of the last question, and maybe it's Annie Harutyunyan who will answer to it. Yes, please. I would like to know from all your mentioned groups, from all your mentioned methods like town halls, etc., etc., which one has worked better during the pandemic situation, like the results? If you have some statistics or just your opinion.
Thank you. And that one might go for other speakers as well. But Annie, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think generally, I think that if you are working with the regions and with rural areas, offline meetings and offline events work better, because we have lots of challenges in the regions, starting from the technical connection and ending with motivating these people to participate meaningfully. So all in all, in the regions, and we are speaking in the regions, I will say that town hall meetings work better, and public engagement meetings too, because you know, when we conducted co-creation for the 4th action plan in Armenia, we went regions by regions to raise people's awareness about the existence of such platform, its opportunities, as well as to share their rights to submit ideas for the benefit of governance, transparency, accountability, accessibility, etc. But we noticed very low level of awareness and engagement at local level, especially in Marxist regions. And very often during the public engagement meetings in regions of local communities, we noticed that even many regional administrations were unaware of OGP platform that was left to come up with a commitment idea or take advantage of these commitments. So all in all, offline town hall meetings and public engagement meetings work better, I think.
Thank you very much. Would any other speakers like to respond to this point about which approaches have been working best since the pandemic has begun? That's fine if not. It sounds like we might have more questions. Arman, do you have more questions from your side, from your group?
Yes, the hot seat.
Yeah.
Yes, we have one question.
Hi, I am Dimitra from Greece, and I just had a question regarding what Arman said about your research and how participation is seen as a really good thing, but then can be manipulated to legitimize basically decisions by government. So I don't know, it's more of an open question. How can we as citizens avoid that? You know, our power as participants, how can we avoid it being manipulated? Does that make sense?
Okay. I guess I will start, and if the other speakers have comments on this, please go ahead. I think the thing is that we have to be very aware where we are participating, how we are participating, and why we are participating. If we don't know why we are participating, we can be manipulated. And we also need to participate, yeah, in order not to let the process go manipulate. Because if we go just sit in a process and agree what is given and do not raise our voice, raise our concerns, and make conflict in a way, yeah, because sometimes conflict is seen something to avoid, but in the cases of participation, if you do not have the space to talk, and if you see like your ideas are not be taken, you need to raise that issue as well, that is not being taken. And so best way of participating, avoiding manipulation, is participating and encouraging our peers to participate, others to participate, because and also ensuring that it's a process, it's not predetermined, it's not something they're trying to sell you, but you have the place to express your opinion, express your concern. And in case of Georgia, what we saw that when the NGOs saw that their commitments are not being taken, they raised the issue, they raised the problem, and they tried, together with the support unit and the government, they tried to do a change to give more power to NGOs to vote and create, to give them more chance to participate and more chance to make the decisions which commitments are taken. So this is my take. If there are other other speakers.
Thanks, Arman. Would any other speakers like to reflect on that one?
I would like to say that we're constantly speaking about the human rights, about how to empower women, children, elders, but we especially forget to make some steps and actions for empowering and educating our citizens about their rights, how they can participate, which actions are the government is launching, and where is the right platforms, and how they can protect their voices. It's very important, as we say, that democracy is starting from the elections, but what's about the out of polling? It's very important to know and to educate people, especially during this pandemic, as sometimes we face some situations within the government where we understand that the education of civic rights should be pointed in line with human rights. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilya. Hovhannes, I have a question for you. Within Arman's presentation, we heard about issues of trust that citizens had, mistrust towards government, but also mistrust towards NGOs. And you spoke about trust earlier as well. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on how we can break that cycle of mistrust and start to get people involved when the level of existing enthusiasm for participating might be quite low.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, it's, I think, one of the most challenging issues that we have in the moment, not only in case of the public sector, but in the business part as well, because like for entities, for individuals, it's always challenging to trust to someone whom in reality they are not able to reach. Like there is, in any case, there is kind of a gap in between individuals or NGOs and in between the government. So one of the issues that I think that can be like support to the decrease or to increase of the trust actually is to when there is any kind of comment or if there's any kind of suggestion from the individuals or the NGO side, if the government even don't accept that kind of proposals, they need to like purely indicate why they haven't accepted that, what are the reasoning under that. So I think that one of the potential possibilities is that, because only in that case you really understand why it was not taken into consideration. But again, it's in theory can work, because in like practice, individuals or citizens can come up with billions of proposals every day. And in practice, I don't believe that the government has that much time or that much like opportunity to say why they haven't accepted these or why they hadn't accepted these. Although currently in Armenia, I don't know if you know that there are like a lot of e-governance portals that you can raise a question that, and based on the laws and regulations, the government have to reply. It's not possible not to get a reply, but in some cases, those replies are in reality, I would say, too technical, and the person who don't really understand what the law is about or what the regulation is about. For instance, for me, it's more important why it happened, and I don't care. I'm not that educated, for instance, to understand what the law says. And all the time, the answers from the government are really technical and based on the laws and regulations. And for individual citizen, it's really not understandable what the answer was about. And they think that the government just didn't want to push or to like give green light to their suggestion. And that's why the issue with the trust increased. So in theory, the best way to give as much like detailed feedback as possible to the people who were coming up with those ideas. But in practice, I think that it wouldn't be the most working way. So we need to figure out some other options might be there. So I know that in Europe, there are some cities where any kind of decision that the government does, they're just gathering around the square and raising the hands, although it's not the most like technically feasible way to do it, but there are some approaches that are done like that. So I think that in the next decades, our challenge as human beings should be to understand how the democracy procedures from the theory can go to the practice, and that at the same time, as I mentioned at the very beginning, they still will stay business-wise sustainable manner, everything would be done. So I honestly don't have the answer to that question. It's just a theory that I can suggest.
Thank you. Well, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. I would back that up. And it's one of those issues with ramping up participation is that you end up getting more ideas, but that means more of those ideas will probably have to be refused because the existing capacity to implement all of them just wouldn't be there. So making sure you inform people about why things can't be implemented, I agree, is absolutely important. Right, we just have a minute left. So Annie, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to make a quick point before we close?
Yes, I just want a quick point, and I will respond to Arman's scope of participation, and I will add that I think that circle participation is very important, where participants are involved in joint development of the reforms or changes, joint implementation of these changes or reforms, and joint monitoring of this effective implementation of these changes. It comes back to like my town hall methodology that I've already presented, and in OGP format, I think that holding town hall meetings at the stage of collecting and processing commitment ideas is very important, so as to ensure feedback and input like provision before the approval of the action plan. In this case, when we conduct this town hall when we apply this town hall methodology and public participation at the embryonic stage of the creation of action plan, we insert ownership formation of the OGP action plan among all the interested parties. And this is very important because when the beneficiaries and the stakeholders are involved in the processes from these very first stages, they come up with need-based commitment. And if they don't come even with the need-based commitment, they at least give feedback on already collected ideas and later on become the real users and appliers of these commitments. So circle and comprehensive participation and meaningful participation is really highly important. And I think that all our joint efforts should be applied to not only ensure widely participation, but also wisely participation, so as to achieve better results. That's all.
Thank you very much, Annie. And that brings us to a close. We've just gone slightly beyond the half hour there, but thank you very much indeed for everybody, and special thanks to our speakers, particularly to all of you for being so clear and so succinct. I thought all of those presentations were really fascinating and gave a very clear picture of what you were talking about. So thank you everyone for participating, and we wish the remainder of the OGP Global Summit week very well indeed. So thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a nice day
Arman.
too.
Looking forward for new things.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.